Hello there, and welcome to the second webinar. My name is Christopher, and I'm from the organization Social Democratic Friends of Israel in Sweden. And I would like to say welcome to our guest. This is Gadi Baltiansky from the Geneva Initiative. And I'm very glad that you accepted to be here. So first, I thought that you could just introduce yourself and your role at the Geneva Initiative.
So good afternoon, good aftermiddag or something like that you say in Swedish. Anyway, shalom. I'm sure you understand this word. Thank you, Christopher, very much for having me today, and thank you all, Social Democratic Friends of Israel. And if you are friends of Israel, you are friends of peace as well, so I thank you twice for that. I'm Gadi Baltiansky. I'm heading the Israeli branch of the Geneva Initiative. We have a Palestinian branch. We work together and cooperate on a daily basis. And I'm one of the founders. And don't give up. Here I am.
Great. And my plan with this discussion today is that first you will get the chance to introduce what the Geneva Initiative solution is like concerning the most common conflict that is talked about, like the borders and the settlements, Jerusalem and the refugees and so on. This is called 101 in English, I think. In Sweden, we call it ABC. And after that, I was thinking that we will have questions with common criticism, people who are skeptical or so against the TwoState solution. And we will alternate with one question that is a bit more from the Israeli or pro-Israeli side, and one question that is more from the Palestinian side. So first, you can then explain for the people who don't know, like, what is your solution to the conflict?
So if in Swedish it's an ABC, I comment on Geneva, I would say that the Geneva Initiative is A to Z proposal, because it covers all issues of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And although, as you said, I'm happy to have questions that are more pro-Israeli or more pro-Palestinian, but the Geneva Initiative is basically pro both sides, and it's based on a win-win approach. So actually, I will very briefly tell you the principles of the agreement, although I'm afraid I will sound a bit boring, because now when you speak about the two-state solution and you ask people either if you support it or oppose it, what is it in the solution? Basically, what they describe is the Geneva Initiative without even knowing it. The Geneva Initiative is a model for an agreement reached 17 years ago. It's a 40 pages booklet. Of course, you can find it in the web, Geneva Accord, in many languages, that later we developed into a 450 pages with annexes on all issues. That's why I said it's A to Z. It's based on the two-state solution, a Palestinian state to be established next to Israel on the basis of the 67 borders with an equal swap, land swap, with an exchange of a bit more than 2% of the land, while Israel annexes land where most of the settlers that live beyond the 67 line live, and give land to Palestine next to the Gaza Strip and in the southern part of the West Bank. So the total size of the Palestinian state will be equal to the size of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with a corridor between the two areas. On Jerusalem, there will be two capitals: Jewish Jerusalem, which is West Jerusalem plus the Jewish neighborhoods of East Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and the Arab Jerusalem or Arab al-Quds will be the capital of Palestine, the Arab neighborhoods and villages that were annexed to Israel in '67. On security, the state of Palestine will be a non-militarized state with a strong police force to deal with internal security and special, very detailed security arrangements that will ensure the security of both countries, including the presence of a third party. On refugees, there is a recognition of the problem, of the suffering of the Palestinian refugees, and their automatic right to return to the state of Palestine, as well as to get compensation for refugeehood and for the property they lost in '48. Israel, together with other countries, will accept a small number of refugees to their own land upon to their sovereign decision, but this will be in agreement and without endangering the Jewish and democratic character of the state of Israel. The Geneva Accord also includes mutual recognition of the rights of the two peoples to statehood and an agreement on the end of conflict and end of all claims. That's, in a nutshell, the Geneva Accord.
Yeah, thank you very much for this quick explanation. So then we will, as I said, alternate common critical questions. And the first one is a pro-Palestinian question. So some pro-Palestinians, they claim that the settlements are so spread out that they say that the two-state solution is dead. And they claim that Palestine will look like a Swiss cheese, and that the settlers or Israel won't accept to move as many people as it would take to create a free Palestinian state. So how would you respond to a criticism like this?
So first, Christopher, I must admit that although we're the Geneva Initiative, we are not in favor of Swiss cheese. So that's not the name of our game. We established the Geneva Initiative after reaching the accord or the model that I just described in order to work with the people in both societies, and we work on a daily basis together, Israelis and Palestinians, to convince that the two-state solution is not only alive and kicking, but not only urgent and very much needed, but also possible. So a feasible solution. So those who say that the two-state solution is dead, as you quoted, basically are saying that peace is dead. I don't know, maybe they want to kill it. We don't want to kill it, because why I'm saying it, because since the beginning of the conflict, the notion that only partition of the land can serve the interests of both sides. Otherwise, if there is one state, it's the continuation of the conflict. Because for many Israelis, the reason for us to be here, and you are all friends of Israel, you know the Zionist idea of having a state for the Jewish people, which grants, obviously, equal rights for all its citizens. But once we are a minority in our land, it will be no longer the state of the Jewish people, or it won't be a democratic state, which is something that obviously we oppose. Now, regarding the settlements that you mentioned, I of course don't want to avoid that, and I will give you two answers to that. First, as I said before, a model like the Geneva Initiative enables 80% of the Israelis who live beyond the 67 line to stay where they are, and still a land swap that enables also a Palestinian state with a full contiguity within the West Bank and between the West Bank and Gaza. Regarding the other settlements, yes, we'll have to evacuate them. But, we evacuated settlements in the past. In Sinai, when we did made peace with Egypt, in the Gaza Strip, when we did what it's called the unilateral disengagement. And here, that took a week in Gaza. Of course, the number was much smaller. But here we're talking about a period of 3 years in Geneva, Others talk about 5 years. So it's a long process which will enable the evacuation of about 25,000 households. It's something that it's doable and possible. I have no doubt, especially when you start the process, you start to implement it, and if this works, then it won't be a dramatic. And in any way, although I can understand the pain, obviously, of the settlers that will have to leave their homes, and I feel empathy towards them. I don't ignore their connection to their homes and their settlements. I must say that more than 9 million Israelis cannot be hostages by those 25,000 households. So I think it's doable. But I'll give you also the second alternative, which is not the Geneva Initiative proposal, but one has to keep it in mind. There is a possibility that in an agreement, we will say, okay, settlers who want to stay can stay as Israeli citizens and Palestinian residents. We will say the last bus leaves on Thursday at 4 o'clock, and those who get the bus, take the bus, they will get the compensation and everything. Those who decide to stay, they can stay. My guess is that almost nobody will stay because they will all want to come to Israel. The fact of the matter is that most of them work in Israel anyway. Their life is in Israel. In the settlements, you don't see culture, you don't see industries, you don't see real daily life. It's like, suburbs that people live there. I don't think it will be such a drama. But in any way, I don't think that this should prevent us from reaching the one and only viable solution to the conflict.
Yes, thank you. So then we will switch, and now there will be a more pro-Israeli question. And this question is like, Israel has offered the Palestinians a two-state solution via Ehud Barak and Ehud Olmert. And then I wonder, what is the difference between these offers and the Geneva Initiative? And if there is only a minor difference, does this mean that the ball is in the Palestinians' court, so to speak? And why haven't they accepted these offers?
So, first of all, I think that the ball is in the court of those who want peace. No, it's in our court. Those who don't want it, those who don't care, the ball is not on their court. We don't participate in this blame game, which in many cases it's a spin that covers something else. The ball is always in my court, in our court, because we want to make the change, as well as in the court of many Palestinians who want to change the current situation. Now, you mentioned the Barak's proposal. Among other things, I served also as the press secretary of Ehud Barak when he was prime minister, so I was with him in Camp David. And I believe I know the negotiations. Many of us at the Geneva Initiative were former official negotiators. That's why we thought that it's doable, that the gaps are not that big and we can build the bridge. Barak's offer was not close to the Geneva Accord, not that far, and he made some breakthroughs and historic concessions, and I have a lot of respect to him. But when he offered to annex more than 9% of the land to Israel, it is not like a land swap of 2.2%, like in Geneva. He didn't agree to a swap of one-on-one. He didn't agree to a Palestinian presence in the what we call the Holy Basin in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. He didn't agree to a realistic solution for the refugees problem, but he made some historic, dramatic progress. And what people tend to forget, and it's not mentioned in your pro-Israeli question because it's so-called not pro-Israeli to ask, but people forget that there was also a Palestinian proposal in Camp David. The Palestinian proposal is also not identical to the Geneva Accord. They demanded more. Geneva Accord is the compromise. So there was a progress, but not enough. And then Barak lost the elections a few months after the Camp David summit in 2000, maybe because of his press secretary, and you can blame. The fact of the matter is that he lost the elections. And since then, there were no negotiations. Still Olmert, and you mentioned Olmert. Olmert and Abbas came very close to an agreement. And they came indeed very close to the Geneva Accord. They were almost there. There were still differences on the size of the land swap. Olmert wanted to annex more settlements and more fingers into the Palestinian land. And also there was a big gap on the issue of refugees. But both of them, Olmert and Abbas, will tell you today, if you ask them, and I heard from them personally and publicly, that they say that if they would have continued, they believe that they would have reached an agreement. They didn't continue because Olmert had to resign because of his personal problems with the criminal allegations, and he had to resign and so on. The compromise that they would have reached, if they would have continued, would have been more or less the Geneva Accord, because they were very close to it. Since then, we didn't have real negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, and maybe because of that, we still don't have an agreement.
Yeah, thank you. Then we will switch kind of again and ask another kind of question. Some pro-Palestinians, they claim that the two-state solution is what they call the racist. And they say this because they believe that the two-state solution suggests that Jews and Palestinians can't live together. And they also refer to that the solution is a separation. And there was some slogan in Israel, we here, them there, rather than a warm peace striving for coexistence. So what is your response to this kind of argument?
First of all, Israelis and Palestinians live together. Within Israel, we have 20% of the population that are Palestinian Israelis. Now, it's not an ideal coexistence, and there is a lot of room for improvement, no doubt about it. But, you know, we just saw in the last year of this COVID-19, which is terrible for all of us, Israeli, Palestinian, Swedish, and, you know, citizens of this world. We saw there's no difference. You know, I got the vaccine. We got the vaccine twice already, right? The two times that I got it from an Arab-Israeli nurse. And many doctors are Arabs in Israel, and pharmacists and teachers and whatever. Now, again, we are far from reaching an ideal situation, but of course we can live together. The issue is that to live together in one state will ensure the continuation of the conflict, because none of us will get our national aspirations. In order to address our national aspirations and rights, including the right for self-determination for the Palestinian people and the Jewish people, we need the two states. So coexistence, yes, but in two neighboring states. Now, I'll be frank with you, Christopher. You quoted the slogan, "We are here, they are there." Indeed, it was a slogan, and at the beginning, about 20 years ago, when we started with it, I mean the Israeli peace camp, or the Israelis in general who support the two-state solution, we believed that we were very close to reach an agreement. And in order to convince the Israeli public that it's good for them, and I take part of the responsibility and take part of the blame, we used this slogan. And we said, you know, don't worry, it's not a marriage, it's a divorce. We're here, they are there. There will be a border. You don't like Arabs, that's fine, you will not see them so much. They will be on the other side. Now, maybe it's not a bad spin if you reach an agreement, and we checked it in all the public opinion polls and focus groups and so on. But what happened since then is that we are not very close to an agreement now. And the 12 last years of Netanyahu as prime minister took us further away from an agreement. And what this slogan and this school of thought did to many Israelis is the contrary. Is okay, they are there, so they are the enemies, so we don't want to see them, we don't want to talk to them, They are the devil. And that's why I think it was our mistake to continue with this message. And I accept the criticism. I think it's our mistake. And that's why here, we, at least in the Geneva Initiative, in the last few years, we changed the strategy. And instead of talking like that, we talk the language of reconciliation. We developed a new approach, a new paper, a new joint concept of dealing with the past, of narratives, of understanding, learning the narrative of the other, of not only thinking of practical solutions for the future, but also trying to heal the wounds of the past. Because we need to explain Israelis and Palestinians that we're here to stay. And actually, even when we will have the two-state solution, it will not be a complete separation. There will be a lot of arrangements of coordination, cooperation, infrastructure, economy, social life, security, many other issues that will actually strengthen the relations between the two countries. So maybe it won't be a marriage, but it will be a partnership. For sure, it will not be an ugly divorce. And we are part of those who caused the damage. I can say the peace camp, whoever. And it's up to us to repair it. And this is what we're working on.
All right, great. So then the next question is that many Israelis, they believe that the Second Intifada was a proof that it's not likely to achieve peace with what they call neighbors who blow up buses with suicide bombers, and that this made many Israelis thinking that the left and the peace movement are naive. So how do you convince Israelis to believe in the peace movement again?
First of all, I think that those who think that the conflict is forever, they are naive. They are naive people. And those who think that we can continue with the status quo without paying a price for it are naive people. Only those who believe and work for a peaceful resolution, they are the realistic people. Every other conflict was eventually solved. And if we just sit and wait without doing anything, then bad news will happen to all of us. So we are not naive. We are realistic. You know, our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, once said that in the land of Israel, if you want to be realistic, you have to believe in miracles. Now, yeah, peace is a miracle, but you have to believe in it, and you have to work for it. Believing it is not enough. Otherwise, the opposite self-fulfilling prophecy will happen. If you think that there's nobody to talk to on the other side, and there are all terrorists who you know, as you said, the suicide bombers and so on, there's no point to talk to them, and therefore there will be no negotiations, there will be no agreement, and you will continue the bloodshed, and then you will say to yourself, you see, I was right, violence continues. That's not the way to deal with it. We have to try and work on the opposite self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, peace you do with your enemies. Otherwise, you don't have to make peace. And no doubt that the Second Intifada that you mentioned caused the trauma on the Israeli society. I remember those days, and many Israelis remember those days. But the question again is if you make yourself a hostage of past traumas or you want to build a better future. This is the question. So for me, many Israelis today believe that they live a normal life. You know, now there are no buses exploding and status quo is fine. We go to the cafes now that they are open after the COVID-19. We can go to a restaurant and we can go to the beach and everything is fine. You don't feel the daily price of the conflict. But that's an illusion and that's a mistake. People got used to the fact that non-normal life is normal, but it's not normal. The fact that my kids have to go for 2 or 3 years in the serving the army and serve in the West Bank and protect an illegal outpost or settlement in the middle of Palestinian cities, it's not normal. And for sure, the fact that for Palestinians have to live and to see the Israeli soldiers entering their homes but in the night is not normal. Not normal for the Palestinians and not normal for the soldiers. So we cannot continue with the status quo just because 20 years ago there was an intifada. And actually, I believe that maybe in contrary to what many people think, Israelis didn't move to the right ideologically. Politically, they vote for this party or that party. It depends on many issues, and we can discuss it maybe in our next conversation. But ideologically, on the issue that we are talking now, as you can see, I'm old enough to remember the days where the slogan "two states for two peoples" was the slogan of a small leftist communist party in Israel, the Arab Jewish Party. The Labour Party was against the idea of establishing a Palestinian state. Today, the last poll that I saw, conducted by the INSS, a highly respected think tank in Israel, 58% of Israelis support the establishment of a Palestinian state or the two-state solution. Now, the numbers changed according to the wording of the question, according to the possible answers, according to the fact that if you include the possibility of I don't know, but between 48, 49 to 60% of the Israelis support the idea of a two-state solution on any given day. That was not the case 20 years ago. So they moved to the left. I remember the days, the right wing in Israel spoke about the greater Israel, the entire land of Israel. If you take today the right wing party, I'm not talking about the racist, the Kahanist party, but the settlers party, the Bennett, who is a former minister of defense, and the right wing of Likud, okay, they speak about annexation of Area C, the settlements, which is 60% of the West Bank. So they gave up on the annexation of the other 40%. They don't talk anymore about annexation of Hebron or Nablus or Jenin or Jericho. I don't want to say that they moved to the left, but overall, the Israeli public is much more open to the idea of the two-state solution, of a realistic solution, despite the second intifada. How I convince Israelis to believe in peace, this is our biggest challenge. Because support is one thing. The support exists. What we miss is the belief that is it possible. It's hard to believe when you have a prime minister that for 12 years basically is showing that he's not interested in negotiations, not to speak about an agreement. He likes the status quo. So it's not easy, it's a challenge. And we are driven by a prime minister, we are being led by the prime minister who is driven by fear. Always fear from Iran, from Hezbollah, from the US, from the Europeans. Now, our message is of hope, not of fear. We want to build a better future. We want to build a peaceful future. Israelis are less open today for a message of hope than a message of fear. So, of course, we have also a frightening scenario, what will happen if we don't reach peace. But it's a challenge, but it's not a failure. I'm telling you, if the circumstances will be such, international, American, Europeans, regional, Arab countries, and with the right leaderships on both sides, Israelis and Palestinians, you will see the Israeli public an overwhelming support for the two-state solution and for a realistic compromise.
Yeah, thanks. So now we have two final questions that are from different narratives, so to speak. And the first one is that pro-Palestinians can claim that this solution makes them give up on 80% of the historical Palestine, and also give up on the right of the refugees to return to their original villages, etc. But all that Israel has to give up are the settlements that they think were illegal according to international law in the first place, and they think that this is unjust. So how would you respond to that?
Christopher, I quoted earlier the first Israeli prime minister, so let me quote now the second Israeli prime minister, who is less known. His name was Moshe Sharett. When he wrote about the conflict, he wrote that it's not a conflict between those who have the justice on their side and those who are not right. It's not between one justice and one injustice. It's between one injustice and one even bigger injustice. What he meant is that the Palestinians will have to pay a price. Otherwise, the price that Jews will pay is even higher, not to have a state of our own. So we're not talking about ultimate justice. Those who want ultimate justice for themselves, I can respect it, but they will not get peace. Now, for me, peace is the most just value on earth. Okay, there's nothing more just than peace. But I know that many Jews who are connected to the city of Hebron, because this is the city of our forefathers in the Bible, will not be able for the time being, for the short term, to live there. And many Palestinians who for them, they lived, or their parents and their grandparents and their great-great-parents lived in Jaffa or Haifa or Akko, they will not be able to live there for the near future. Although we have our dreams and they have their dreams. But what's the limit of the dream? To dream is fine. Overnight you can dream of whatever you want. But when you wake up, if you fulfill your dream in a way that this dream becomes the nightmare of your partner, of your neighbor, then you cross this red line. So I respect the attachment of the Palestinians to the land as I respect the attachment of the Jewish people to the land. But we have to make the compromise. That's exactly the compromise. I can understand that it's painful to make the concession for both sides. But without making those concessions, it will be much more painful for all of us.
Thank you. So the final question I had is that there is a formula called land for peace, and in one way it's easy to practically give up land, but there is a fear that the Palestinian state won't control the armed groups, and that the state will not have a monopoly on violence that is common in democratic societies. And also point how to Hezbollah controls southern Lebanon after Israel leaving there, and that Hamas controls Gaza after leaving the settlements there in 2005. And this is also combined with a fear that some will take advantage of a more free Palestine as a first step towards the Palestine that they call from the river to the sea. So how will Israel be guaranteed to have its part of the land for peace formula?
So it's a question that indeed we get a lot from Israelis, and it's a legitimate question, of course, but it comes from a place which, in my view, is a bit problematic. What is this place? This is the place of why not? Why no? And always we can find reasons or excuses of why no. And what if? And what will happen if the agreement will be violated? Of course, you rent an apartment, you buy a car. What happens if the other guy is cheating you? Yeah, it can happen. It's a risk. So there are risks here. Both sides take a risk. But our basic school of thought should be, in my view, instead of why no, how yes. This is my basic assumption. Let's find solutions. Let's not ask ourselves all the time why not, because otherwise it will lead you nowhere. So I'm not ignoring the risks, of course, in terms of security risk for Palestinians and risk for Israel. First of all, as an Israeli, I can tell you, we are not suggesting to dismantle the army. We have a very strong army, and it will continue to be a very strong army after we reach an agreement as well. And we have all these security arrangements, very detailed, with Air Force, with the early warning stations, with intelligence, with the temporary presence, with technology that even didn't exist 20 years ago. Now it's much easier to control borders and to monitor what's going on the ground. You know, in 2014, when there were talks mainly between Israel and the US under the leadership of President Obama and Secretary John Kerry, there was a team in Israel headed by an Israeli general with people from the army and the Mossad and so on, the intelligence, who identified 26 possible challenges or threats to Israel's security if we reach an agreement like the two-state solution, like the Geneva Initiative. 26 potential challenges and threats. They found 26 solutions to every single challenge because there are solutions. It's a question of risks management. And again, I'm not saying that it's risks-free. I'm just saying that not taking this risk is much more dangerous for us. Yeah. The risk of not reaching a solution, of becoming a binational state, of hurting our morals and our values, of continuing the conflict, of causing casualties for people on both sides, of paying this terrible price, in my view, it's much more dangerous than the possibility that one terrorist will cross the border from Iraq to Jordan and then from Jordan to Palestine and nobody will prevent him to do his terrorist attack. Okay, we can deal with it, and don't forget that it will become a reality of peace. It's not today's reality. We're signing a peace treaty. We signed a peace treaty with Egypt. You mentioned Gaza and Lebanon, but we didn't have a peace treaty neither with Hamas nor with Hezbollah. We have peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt. And with Egypt, we had a war in 48, in 56, in 67, in 73, and then we reached a peace treaty in 79. And since then, more than 40 years, there was no one single casualty between Israel and Egypt. Why? Because we signed a peace treaty. Because it's in the interest of both parties to preserve peace. This will be the case after we sign a peace treaty between Israel and the state of Palestine.
Yeah, thank you. Great answers. So that was my final question. I see that some of the people watching, they wonder what kind of political change is possible towards a peaceful solution. So I think that you can make some final words to the audience and maybe talk about this and also how people can support your initiative and so on.
Thank you. So in terms of political change, you know, we had the elections more than a month ago, and we still don't know the results of the elections. It's still yet to be seen who will be the next prime minister. So we don't know yet what kind of government we'll have. But I think if you see the power of the parties that are, let's say, close to the Social Democrats in Sweden, which are Labour Party and Meretz, they more than doubled their power in the Knesset. They had altogether 6 members in the previous Knesset, and now they have 13 together. It's not something to ignore. And even within other parties like Yesh Atid, the party of Yair Lapid, they themselves move a little bit towards our direction. For the first time in their platform, they say now clearly, they speak about the two-state solution. And there is a willingness, a public open willingness to cooperate with the Arab parties, which is a very important development on many fronts towards the next government. It won't be the ideal government, but again, we have to make compromises. I don't know if we will have a better government in a few weeks, or maybe it will take a year or two. I don't know, but the good result of the last elections is that we know that we don't have. We don't know what exactly we'll have, but we know what we don't have. We We will not have a right-wing extremist government that will prevent any progress towards a solution. On the Palestinian side, there is a split between Gaza and the West Bank, between Fatah and Hamas, which is a problem. It's an obstacle. And I think we and internationals should work towards reconciliation, internal reconciliation within the Palestinians and unity of forces. Maybe if they will have elections next month, it will be a step towards it. If they don't, we need to work on it so it will happen, because we need a unified Palestinian leadership on the other side. Beyond the political changes here locally, we need you. We need the international voices, the international support. So first of all, I want to thank you all for the patience and the time and the initiative to have me with you. I think it shows already that you care, and this is something that is not taken for granted, and we are thankful for that. I want to thank you for raising your voice, also for what you already did, and in advance for what you will continue to do, for being active, for talking to your government about the need to support politically, publicly, and if possible also financially, the forces that work for peace. We, like others, we are based on contributions. We don't get money from the Israeli government or from the establishment. We receive funds from good people, good foundations, and good governments. And we have a good cooperation with the Swedish Foreign Ministry and the Swedish Embassy in Israel for several years, and we have a lot of respect. The current Foreign Minister, Anna Linda, we met her many times before she became minister, when she was in charge of the foreign relations of the party, and we met many others who are very thankful for the Swedish role and the Swedish engagement and positive positions on our conflict. So you are more than welcome to approach us through email, through the website, through Facebook, directly to us. I can just promise you one thing and ask you for one thing. I can promise you that we, Palestinians and Israelis of the Geneva Initiative, we don't give up. And I can ask you only, don't give up on us, because we don't give up on peace. Thank you very much, Christopher, and thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.